Billionaire forced to get married, but the wedding night turns into a love story he never saw. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The sound of rain pressed against the tall glass windows of Cole Tower, a 30-story monument of steel and pride in downtown Manhattan. Inside the top-floor boardroom, a storm of another kind was brewing. According to your father's will, the lawyer said, his voice echoing through the silent room, if you are not legally married within 30 days, the board will transfer control of Cole Industries to the trustees. No. Ethan Cole sat at the head of the long oak table, his suit flawless, his expression unreadable. The youngest billionaire in the city, 34 years old, brilliant, feared, and completely alone. His jaw flexed once, the only sign of irritation. So that is how it is, he said quietly. Across from him, his stepmother's red lips curved into a polite, poisonous smile. Your father believed a man should understand family before running one, she said sweetly. Ethan's eyes were like cold steel. Then I will follow his lesson. I will get married. The lawyer blinked. Sir, finding a genuine partner in 30 days. It will not be genuine, Ethan cut in. It will be a contract. I will find someone who understands terms, not promises. Across the city, in a cramped studio apartment above a flower shop, Lia Tran sat surrounded by unpaid bills and design sketches. Her last client had canceled. The landlord had given her 1 week to pay rent. Her dream of running a small interior design firm was slipping away faster than the rain outside her window. Her phone buzzed. Lia? It was her friend Hannah, the cafe manager who always knew everyone's business. You are going to think I am crazy, but someone is looking for a woman to, well, get married. Fast. Lia frowned. Married? Like a dating app? No. Hannah lowered her voice. A real marriage. 6 months, legal, no strings. The man is a billionaire. It is supposed to be business only. You would be paid enough to start your own company. Lia let out a short laugh, half disbelief, half exhaustion. Hannah, I do not sell myself. I know, Hannah said softly, but maybe think of it as selling time. Just meet him. You might not regret it. The next evening, Lia walked into a private lounge at the Marlowe Hotel. The lights were dim, the air thick with quiet luxury. Ethan Cole stood by the window, phone in hand, every inch the man she had only seen on magazine covers. He turned as she entered, his eyes sharp, assessing. Miss Tran? She nodded, her voice steady though her knees were not. Yes, I was told you needed a partner. He gestured to the seat across from him. I need a wife. Temporarily. For 30 days. You will be compensated fairly. Lia blinked. That sounds like a business deal. It is, he said. There will be rules. He slid a thin folder across the table. Inside was a printed contract. No intimacy, no interference with company affairs. Appear together at 5 public events. Confidentiality is absolute. Lia stared at the paper, then at him. Do you even believe in love, Mr. Cole? He smiled faintly, without warmth. Love complicates everything. I prefer control. Ardit. The rain outside softened into a slow rhythm, the sound almost like a heartbeat. Lia's gaze lingered on the pen beside the contract. Every instinct told her to walk away. But her landlord's warning echoed in her mind, along with her mother's old words. Sometimes survival is not pretty, but it keeps the dream alive. She picked up the pen, her voice calm but low. Fine, I will marry you, Mr. Cole. But only on paper. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Then on paper it is. Outside, the storm finally broke, lightning streaking across the sky as if sealing a deal neither of them truly understood yet. Rain still whispered against the city windows when the papers were signed. Ethan Cole closed the folder, his voice calm and clipped. The ceremony will be tomorrow morning at the courthouse. My assistant will arrange everything. You will receive the transfer after that. Lia nodded, her fingers trembling slightly though she tried to hide it. I understand. When she left the Marlowe Hotel that night, the streets glowed wet under the amber light. Her reflection in the puddles looked like a stranger. She had agreed to marry a billionaire she barely knew, and yet part of her felt strangely certain. It was not about money. It was survival. It was about keeping her small business alive, keeping her name from fading into unpaid bills. She walked back to her apartment, the city buzzing around her. The envelope with the contract felt heavy in her bag, heavier than any design portfolio she had ever carried. The next morning, the courthouse was quiet. A few people waited in line to file marriage licenses, none realizing that the man in the tailored gray suit was the youngest billionaire in Manhattan. Ethan stood straight, expression unreadable, while Lia smoothed her simple cream dress. She had done her own hair. No stylist. No makeup team. Just a quiet dignity that made her look more honest than any of the glamorous women he had met before. The judge spoke the words in a monotone voice, and they repeated them without hesitation. "Do you, Ethan Cole, take this woman?" "Yes." "And do you, Lia Tran?" "Yes." It was over in less than 10 minutes. No flowers, no vows, no family. Only a pen scratching across paper and 2 signatures that changed everything. Outside the courthouse, Ethan handed her an umbrella as the drizzle returned. "There is a driver waiting," he said. "You will move into my residence for the duration of the agreement. Appearances matter." Lia hesitated. "Appearances for whom?" "For everyone who watches me," he replied simply. "The press, the shareholders, the people who need to believe I am stable." She met his eyes for a second. There was something lonely there, something that flickered and disappeared before she could name it. Cole Manor sat on the edge of the Hudson River, its windows reflecting the gray morning light. When the car pulled up to the iron gates, Lia felt her stomach twist. The mansion looked like something from another world, marble steps, columns, and a garden that seemed to stretch for acres. Inside, a butler greeted her politely and led her through halls filled with modern art and silence. Her room was on the east side, overlooking the water. The view was breathtaking, but the emptiness of the space felt heavier than the rain clouds above. That evening, she found herself seated across from Ethan at a long dining table that could have hosted 20 guests. Only 2 plates were set. A quiet piano melody played somewhere distant. Ethan cut his steak with precise movements, his gaze occasionally drifting to her. "I understand this is unusual," he said at last. "You are free to continue your work. My staff will arrange an allowance and transportation. In public, we act as a couple. In private, we remain professional." Lia placed her fork down carefully. "Professional, right." She looked around the vast room, the expensive stillness, the spotless perfection. "Does it not ever get lonely in here?" He paused, knife midair, then smiled faintly. "Lonely is a luxury, Miss Tran. I am too busy for it." Her lips curved slightly, half amusement, half disbelief. "That sounds like something a machine would say." "Machines do not make mistakes," he said, meeting her eyes. "People do." The rest of the meal passed in silence. But when Lia stood to leave, she caught him watching her again. Just for a second, his expression softer, almost curious. Later that night, in her new room, Lia unpacked the few belongings she had brought. A sketchbook, a pencil case, and a photo of her mother holding her as a child. She placed it on the nightstand beside the grand bed that did not feel like hers. Down the hall, Ethan sat in his study, staring out at the rain, tracing lines down the glass. On his desk lay the same contract she had signed. His father's portrait hung above him, a silent reminder of duty and legacy. He picked up his glass, his reflection staring back, sharp suit, steady posture, but hollow eyes. "Married," he said under his breath. The word felt foreign, almost absurd. Yet the memory of her voice, quiet and steady in the courthouse, refused to leave his mind. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the river. Inside, 2 strangers under the same roof began the strangest chapter of their lives, one written not in love, but in the small, uncertain pauses between duty and desire. Morning light spilled across the river and through the tall windows of Cole Manor. Lia woke to silence, the kind that did not belong to homes but to museums. The air smelled faintly of fresh linen and rain. For a moment she forgot where she was, until she saw the marble ceiling and remembered the contract, the courthouse, the man she had married yesterday. She got dressed quietly, choosing jeans and a white shirt, her version of armor. When she stepped into the hallway, a housekeeper greeted her politely. "Mrs. Cole, breakfast is ready in the conservatory." The title caught her off guard. "Mrs. Cole," she repeated softly, as if testing whether it fit. It did not. Ethan was already seated when she entered. The morning paper lay open beside his plate, untouched. He was dressed for work, dark suit, watch gleaming, every movement precise. He looked up briefly. "Good morning." Morning," she replied, taking the seat opposite him. The table between them seemed as wide as the Hudson itself. After a moment, she cleared her throat. "I was thinking about going back to my studio later. There are still some clients who need updates." He nodded. "I will have my driver take you." "That is not necessary," she said quickly. "I can take the subway." Ethan folded the newspaper, his eyes steady on her. "Lia, you are my wife now, at least in public. It will not look appropriate for Mrs. Cole to ride the subway carrying a paint-stained backpack." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Maybe that is the most honest part of me, Mr. Cole. The backpack, not the name." Something flickered behind his eyes, amusement, maybe admiration, but it passed too quickly to tell. "Do as you wish," he said, returning to his paper. Later that afternoon, Lia stood in her tiny studio across town, surrounded by sketches and color samples. The walls were chipped, the windows drafty, but it felt real, alive. Her assistant Mia burst in with wide eyes. "Lia Tran, are you serious? You actually married Ethan Cole?" Lia sighed. "I told you, it is complicated." Mia laughed nervously. "Complicated as in fairy tale or as in lawsuit?" "Neither," Lia said, smiling faintly. "It is just temporary." She did not explain the contract. She did not explain that her name on his made the world treat her differently overnight. The same clients who had ignored her calls last week now flooded her inbox with invitations. Power, she realized, had a strange echo. It changed how people heard your voice. That evening, back at Cole Manor, the first event of their public appearances awaited a charity dinner at the city's art museum. Lia stood in front of a mirror as a stylist fastened a silver bracelet around her wrist. The gown Ethan had chosen shimmered in shades of pale gold, elegant yet restrained. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. When she stepped into the foyer, Ethan paused mid-call. For the first time, the ever-controlled CEO looked uncertain. "You look perfect," he said quietly. "Thank you," she replied, not quite meeting his eyes. The drive to the museum was silent except for the hum of the city. When they arrived, camera flashes exploded from the press line. Ethan placed a steadying hand on her back as they walked. The touch was formal, but she could feel the warmth through the thin fabric. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Cole, is it true the marriage was sudden? Miss Tran, how did you meet?" Lia smiled politely. "Sometimes life introduces you to people you never expected." Ethan glanced at her, surprised by her calm. He had expected fear, not grace. Inside the grand hall, the evening unfolded with speeches and champagne. Investors and socialites swarmed them, congratulating, analyzing, whispering. Lia handled each conversation with quiet confidence. She spoke about community projects, her design work, her belief that beauty should belong to everyone, not just those who could afford it. When she stepped away to catch her breath, Ethan found her standing by a large abstract painting. "You seem comfortable in this world," he said. "I am comfortable in any place that has art," she replied. Then she looked at him. "You built an empire, Ethan, but do you ever stop to see what it looks like?" He followed her gaze to the painting strokes of chaos and light colliding. "I see numbers, not colors. Maybe that is why you are rich," she said softly, "and also why you look lonely." The words caught him off guard. No one had ever said that to him. For a moment, he could not answer. She turned away first, leaving him staring at the painting, seeing it differently for the first time. Hours later, as the gala ended, they walked out beneath the marble columns. The rain had stopped, and the city lights reflected on the wet pavement like 1,000 tiny stars. In the car, Ethan broke the silence. "You handled them well tonight. The reporters, the board members. You made it look real." Lia looked out the window. "Maybe that is what we both do, best make things look real." He glanced at her, her profile lit by passing streetlights. For the first time since the contract began, Ethan Cole felt something unfamiliar curiosity mixed with unease. The kind of feeling that warned a man his carefully built walls were starting to crack. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady, as if the city itself knew that something had shifted between the billionaire and the woman who had agreed to marry him only on paper. The next week passed in a rhythm neither of them could name. Mornings were quiet breakfasts with coffee and polite nods. Days were separate lives, Ethan in boardrooms filled with glass and tension, Lia in her studio surrounded by sketches and colors that smelled of freedom. But every evening ended the same. Two people under the same roof, pretending not to listen for each other's footsteps down the hall. On Thursday night, the silence finally broke. Lia stood in the grand hallway holding a stack of documents she had accidentally taken from the study while collecting her own design materials. They were blueprints for a new corporate building, but one line at the bottom caught her eye. Proposed demolition of Riverside Block. Her chest tightened. That was the neighborhood where her studio stood. She found Ethan in the library, reading under the warm glow of the lamp. "You are tearing down the Riverside Block?" she asked, voice steady but firm. He looked up, surprised. "It is part of a redevelopment project. Outdated infrastructure. It will bring jobs, better housing. It will destroy families," she interrupted. "And small businesses, including mine." Ethan's tone remained calm but cool. "It is just business, Lia. Business for you. Life for us," she said quietly. He set the book aside. "I did not know your studio was there." That is the problem, Ethan," she said. "You do not know. You do not see what your decisions look like from the other side of the city." For a long moment neither spoke. The air between them was thick with everything they were not saying. Then she placed the documents on his desk and walked away, her heels clicking like small thunderclaps across the marble floor. Later that night, Ethan stood on the balcony overlooking the river, the file still in his hand. He read through the pages again, noticing for the first time the list of names, residents, tenants, shop owners, each name a small story. He thought of Lia's eyes when she spoke about art, the way her voice trembled between conviction and heartbreak. He closed the folder and whispered to the rain, "Maybe she is right." 2 days later, Lia received a call from a city official. "Miss Tran, congratulations," the man said cheerfully. "Coal Industries has just announced a revision to the Riverside project. The historic buildings, including your studio, will be preserved and renovated as a cultural space." She froze. "I am sorry, what?" "Mr. Cole personally requested it." When the call ended, she sat still for a long moment, staring at the paint-stained window. Then she smiled, just a little. That evening, she found him in the same library, reviewing papers again. "You changed the plan," she said softly. He looked up, eyes unreadable. "I realized not every legacy needs to erase the old to make room for the new." "That sounds like something a human would say," she replied, echoing her words from breakfast days ago. A quiet laugh escaped him. "Maybe I am learning." She leaned against the doorway. "Why did you do it, Ethan?" He hesitated. "Because I could, and because I wanted to see what it would feel like to make a decision that actually mattered to someone." Lia walked closer, the distance shrinking between them. "It mattered," she said. Their eyes met. The silence that followed was no longer cold. It hummed with something fragile and alive. The following weekend, Ethan insisted she accompany him to a board gala at the Coal Industries headquarters. "It will be full of reporters and investors," he warned. "You may want to prepare for questions." She smiled. "I have survived worse than cameras." The night of the event, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne. Lia entered on Ethan's arm, her emerald gown catching every flash of light. The whispers started immediately rumors about the contract marriage, the charity project, the sudden change in company policy. A reporter approached. "Mrs. Cole, do you feel your husband's decision to protect Riverside was influenced by you?" Lia looked straight into the camera, her voice steady. "Marriage, real or not, teaches you something about listening. I am proud he listened to people who have less power but equal worth." "Oh." Ethan watched her speak, his chest tightening with a feeling he had not expected, admiration mixed with something deeper. When the crowd moved on, he leaned close and said quietly, "You were brilliant." She glanced at him, a teasing glimmer in her eyes. "So were you. For once, you looked human." He laughed under his breath, the sound low and warm. "Careful, Mrs. Cole. You might make me believe in this." Lia smiled faintly. "Maybe believing is the point." That night, after the gala, they returned home. The house was dark, except for the soft lights in the hallway. Lia paused near the stairs, uncertain if she should say goodnight. Ethan stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of rain still clinging to his suit. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for reminding me that I am not just a name on a building." She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. And thank you for proving that even billionaires can change. No. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. Then she smiled gently, turned, and walked toward her room. Ethan stood there for a long time after she disappeared down the hall, the sound of her footsteps fading like a promise he did not yet know how to keep. Outside, the rain began again, light and steady, like the echo of a story still being written. The following morning, sunlight cut through the gray clouds and spilled across the long dining table. The rain had stopped, but the silence between Ethan and Lia carried its own weather. She sipped her coffee, pretending to read the newspaper. He spoke first. "There will be a board meeting this evening," he said. "It is the quarterly review. They will expect my wife to attend." Lia looked up, one brow raised. "Your wife? You mean your business partner on paper?" He allowed a faint smile. "That too." She set down her cup. "You could just tell them I am busy with work." "Oh, I could," he admitted. "But they already assume you are the reason I changed the Riverside project. They want to see the woman who made the billionaire grow a conscience." She laughed softly. "Then let them look. Maybe they will learn something." By the time the meeting began, the coal industry's boardroom was filled with people in tailored suits and careful smiles. Cameras flashed as Ethan entered, Lia walking beside him. She wore a simple navy dress, elegant without effort. The directors exchanged glances, a few whispered among themselves. Ethan began the presentation, his tone confident and measured. He spoke of growth, new initiatives, and community investments. Then one of the senior partners, Mr. Rawlins, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Mr. Cole," he said, "some of us question whether personal emotions are clouding your business judgment." Ethan's gaze did not waver. "If doing the right thing is considered emotional, then I will take that risk." The room murmured. Rawlins pressed again. "And Mrs. Cole, how much influence does she have over these decisions?" Lia felt every eye turned toward her. She met the old man's stare without fear. "The only influence I have," she said, "is reminding him that behind every number there is a name, and behind every profit there is a person." A quiet fell over the room. Even Rawlins said nothing more. Ethan looked at her with something close to pride. When the meeting ended, they stepped out into the lobby filled with reporters. Flashes erupted, voices overlapping. "Mr. Cole, are you confirming that your marriage is real?" one shouted. Ethan's hand found hers instinctively. "My marriage," he said evenly, "is the one thing I do not need to justify." The photographers froze, stunned by his tone. For the first time, Ethan Cole had answered with something that sounded like truth. As they left the building, Lia turned to him. "That was brave." He exhaled. "It was honest. There is a difference." That evening, back at Cole Manor, they shared dinner, without the usual formality. The house seemed softer somehow, the walls less distant. Ethan loosened his tie, his jacket draped over a chair. Lia laughed as he tried to help her pour wine and almost spilled it. "I never thought I would see Ethan Cole, the untouchable CEO, nervous about pouring a glass of wine," she teased. He smiled, shaking his head. "I am still learning the basics of being human." "Oh." They both laughed, but then the laughter faded into a quieter rhythm. The air changed. "Lia," he said slowly, "when this agreement ends, what will you do?" She looked down at her glass. "I will rebuild my studio. Maybe open classes for young designers. Maybe finally rest." "And if I asked you to stay?" She looked at him, unsure if she heard him right. "Stay? As in no contracts, no conditions, just stay." Her heart beat faster, but she forced a calm smile. "You are very good at negotiations, Ethan. But this is not another deal." He nodded, eyes softening. "I know. That is why it scares me." Later that night, Lia stood on the balcony overlooking the river, her hair catching the breeze. Ethan joined her quietly, standing beside her but not touching. "I used to think power meant never needing anyone," he said. "Now I am starting to think it means having the courage to." She turned to him. "So what happens next?" Ethan looked out at the city lights. "Whatever happens, I do not want to lose what this has become. Even if it started as something false." Lia smiled faintly. "Maybe the truth does not care how it starts, only how it ends." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was small but full of something unspoken. A few days later, headlines filled the news. Coal Industries announces new community grant program. Led by Lia Cole. The company's image soared, and so did the whispers about the Fake marriage that became real. That night, Lia found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a note in Ethan's handwriting. The contract expires tomorrow, but if you are willing, I would like to start something real with no expiration date. Oh. She looked up to find him standing in the doorway, holding a simple ring, nothing like the one she wore for show. Ethan, she whispered, you do not have to do this. I know, he said softly. That is why I want to. The world outside faded, the city, the company, the headlines. There was only the sound of the river, steady and alive. Lia stepped closer, her voice trembling just enough to be real. Then let us begin again. He smiled, sliding the ring onto her finger. No more pretending. And for the first time since their contract began, Ethan Cole kissed his wife not as an obligation, but as a choice. The story that started with ink and signatures ended with something far stronger: truth, found in the most unexpected place. Spring arrived quietly in New York, brushing the city in soft light and slow mornings. The mansion on the Hudson felt different now, less like a museum, more like a home. Lia filled the rooms with small things: sketches, vases of wildflowers, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen before sunrise. Ethan noticed each change but never mentioned it. He simply smiled more, spoke softer, and for once let the days move without controlling them. One morning, he found her in the garden, barefoot, crouched beside a patch of tulips that had just begun to bloom. The sunlight traced the edges of her hair like gold. You are awake early, she said without turning. He crossed his arms, leaning against the railing. I did not sleep much. The board meeting went late. She glanced up at him. You work too hard. It is a habit, he replied. Hard to break. She smiled gently. Then maybe you need a new one. He walked closer. What kind? Living, she said simply. The word hung in the air, quiet and heavy. That afternoon, they attended a small charity event for the new grant program, her program. The community center buzzed with families, artists, and volunteers. It was nothing like the grand galas he was used to. There were no tuxedos, no flashing cameras, just real laughter echoing through a room that smelled of paint and coffee. Lia introduced Ethan to a young sculptor who had just received a scholarship. The boy's hands were stained with clay as he said, If it was not for this grant, I would have quit school. Ethan nodded, his voice low. Keep going. The world needs people who build instead of buy. Lia watched him from across the room, a warmth rising in her chest. This was not the man who once spoke only in numbers. This was someone who had learned how to listen. Later, when the event ended, they stood outside under strings of soft lights. She said quietly, You were good in there. Oh, he smiled. You make it easy. For someone who once said love complicates everything, she teased. You seem to be handling it well. He looked at her for a long time. Maybe love is not the complication. Maybe it is the answer I never thought I needed. But happiness never comes without its test. 2 weeks later, an article appeared online, an exposé claiming their marriage had started as a contract. It spread fast, igniting gossip and doubt. Investors panicked, headlines screamed, and cameras returned to the gates of Cole Manor. Ethan read the article in silence, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. Lia stood across the room, her face pale. Who would do this? She whispered. My aunt, he said bitterly. She never accepted that I inherited the company. She has been waiting for a scandal. Lia swallowed hard. Then this is my fault. I should have... Stop, he said sharply. This is not on you. But it is true, Ethan. It started as a contract. People will believe what they see. He crossed the room, his eyes fierce but full of something softer beneath. Then let them see something real. That evening, Ethan called a press conference. Reporters packed the atrium of Cole Industries, their cameras pointed at the podium. Lia stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly. He spoke clearly, without notes. Yes, he said. Our marriage began as an agreement, a mistake born out of pride and pressure. But somewhere between the signatures and the silence, it became real. She taught me that leadership is not about control, it is about compassion. And she taught me that love is not a weakness, it is a choice. The crowd buzzed. Questions flew. Flashes burst. Lia's eyes stung with tears she refused to hide. When the conference ended, Ethan took her hand before the cameras again, not as a performance, but as truth. Whatever happens next, he whispered, we face it together. She nodded, unable to speak. The storm of headlines lasted days, then began to fade. Some believed them, some did not. But for Ethan and Lia, it no longer mattered. What was once a secret had become a story, messy, human, and theirs. One evening, as the sun fell over the river, Lia found him in the study. He looked up from the desk, the stress lines gone from his face. "They will keep talking for a while," she said. "Let them," he answered. "Every story ends eventually. Ours is still being written." "Oh." She walked over, standing behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Do you regret any of it?" He reached for her hand, fingers intertwining. "Not a single day." The last of the sunlight spilled across the room, warm and golden. Outside, the city pulsed with life, uncaring and endless. Inside, two people who had once signed a contract sat in quiet peace, no longer bound by ink but by something far stronger. Lia whispered, "So this is what real feels like." Ethan smiled. "Yes, and it was worth every wrong beginning to find it." The sound of the river carried through the open window, steady and calm. Their story, once a business arrangement, had finally become what neither of them had dared to imagine, a love story that no one could write but them. Weeks passed, and the noise outside finally quieted. The tabloids found new stories to chase, and the city's attention drifted elsewhere. Inside Cole Manor, peace settled like sunlight after a storm. Lia spent her mornings painting near the east windows, and Ethan often paused outside the door just to watch her. The same woman who had once walked into his life with nothing now carried his entire world in her quiet strength. One afternoon, as Lia packed art supplies for another community workshop, Ethan stepped into the room holding a small envelope. His expression was unreadable. "What is that?" she asked. He handed it to her. "An invitation. From the Chamber of Commerce. They are honoring coal industries for the community project you started." Her eyes widened. "They are honoring me?" "They are honoring us," he said softly. "You showed them that business could have a heart." She smiled. "Then we will go together." The night of the ceremony, the ballroom glimmered with gold light and soft music. Lia wore a simple ivory gown. Ethan, a black suit with no tie, his usual armor left behind. When their names were called, the applause was warm and genuine. As they walked to the stage, Lia could feel his hand steady at her back. The presenter spoke. "For transforming a corporate empire into a symbol of compassion, we present this award to Ethan and Lia Cole." Ethan took the microphone, his voice deep but unguarded. "This honor belongs to my wife," he said. "She reminded me that success without kindness is failure dressed in a suit." The room fell silent for a breath, then erupted in applause. Lia's eyes shimmered under the lights, and when she turned to him, her smile said more than words ever could. Later that night, they walked out into the quiet street behind the hotel. The city glowed around them, alive but gentle. Lia leaned against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how it started?" she asked. Ethan chuckled softly. "Every day. I remember the contract, the conditions, the rules, and I remember breaking all of them." She laughed. "You broke them beautifully." He looked down at her, eyes filled with warmth. "If I could rewrite the first page, I would still choose you. Every mistake led me here." The breeze carried the faint scent of rain again, the same scent from the night they first met. Lia reached for his hand. "Maybe it was never a mistake," she whispered. "Maybe it was fate pretending to be paperwork." He squeezed her hand, smiling. "Then let us keep signing our story one day at a time." They stood there beneath the city lights. No cameras, no contracts, just two people who had learned that sometimes love does not begin with a promise. It begins with a choice to stay. Autumn crept over the city, painting the skyline in shades of amber and gold. Cole Manor glowed under the evening light, its windows alive with warmth. Inside, Lia worked in her studio, paintbrush in hand, her focus unbroken until she sensed someone watching her. Ethan stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes soft with pride. "You have been in here for hours," he said gently. "Do artists ever rest?" She smiled without looking up. "Do billionaires ever stop trying to fix the world?" He walked closer, his gaze falling on the canvas. It was a portrait of the garden behind the house, the river reflecting soft sunlight. But there were two figures in the painting, sitting side by side beneath the willow tree. Him and her. Ethan's voice dropped. "Is that us?" "Yes," she replied. "It is the day you said you wanted to build something that lasts. I wanted to remember it." He stood quietly for a long time. "You already built something that lasts," he said. "This, us. She turned, eyes meeting his. The room smelled of oil, paint, and rain. "It feels strange," she whispered. "We started as strangers signing a deal. Now I cannot imagine a life without you." He reached for her hand. "Then do not imagine it. Just live it." Weeks later, Ethan surprised her with a visit to her old neighborhood. The small street where her first studio once stood was now transformed a community art center, newly restored under the Cole Foundation. Children's laughter filled the air, and murals bloomed across the walls in color and hope. Lia stood still, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You did this?" Ethan nodded. "You gave me purpose. I only returned the favor." She walked through the front doors, her fingers grazing the brick walls that once held her dreams. Inside, a plaque hung above the entrance. It read, "The Tran Center for Art and Community, in honor of the woman who turned grace into change." Her throat tightened. "Ethan, this is yours," he said simply. "Everything you inspired deserves a place that carries your name." Lia's eyes shimmered with quiet tears. She turned to him, her voice trembling. "You kept your promise." He smiled. "No, you made me believe in promises again." They stood there surrounded by color, laughter, and light, the echoes of everything they had built together. The city outside kept moving, but for that moment, time stood still. What began as a marriage of convenience had become a masterpiece of love, painted with patience, trust, and 1,000 small choices that finally felt like forever. Winter returned quietly, wrapping the city in silver light. A year had passed since that first rainy evening, when a billionaire and a struggling designer signed a contract that neither of them truly understood. Now, Cole Manor no longer echoed with emptiness. It hummed with life friends visiting, laughter drifting through the hallways, and art hanging on every wall like fragments of a shared memory. On a crisp December morning, Ethan stood on the balcony overlooking the frozen river. Lia joined him, a wool blanket draped over her shoulders. "You always wake before sunrise," she said softly. He smiled. "I like watching the light find its way back." She leaned against the railing beside him. "It is hard to believe everything that happened in a year." He looked at her, the reflection of dawn in his eyes. "It feels like I spent my whole life building walls," he said. "And you turned them into windows." Lia's lips curved into a small smile. "You rebuilt my dream. I guess we are even." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Not yet." She froze as he opened it. Inside was a simple gold band, delicate and warm against the morning light. "We never had a real wedding," he said. "No cameras, no signatures, no conditions. Just us. Will you marry me again, this time for love?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded before she could find words. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." A week later, beneath the glass roof of the art center she had once dreamed of, they stood surrounded by friends and the people their story had touched. The ceremony was small, quiet, filled with laughter and sunlight. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan looked at her and whispered, "This time, no contracts, no deadlines." Lia smiled through happy tears. "Only forever." The crowd applauded softly as they kissed, the river glimmering through the windows behind them.